I think at the elite level, at the elite space, whether you're a player, coach, or front office, there are going to be slings and arrows. And some of it comes inside the building and some of it comes outside the building. And so what's really interesting to me is talking with colleagues, talking with coaches, talking with players. There sometimes is like this theme of, hey, you got to have really thick skin. You got to have that kind of leather skin. You got to be able to. And I actually go in the opposite direction. Like I find some of the most mentally tough individuals I've been around are the ones that have a level of vulnerability to them. So instead of being immune to the slings and arrows, they're actually going, hey, that really hurts. And they want to process and talk about that. And the reason why I gravitate more towards that vulnerability as strength kind of dynamic is those with the leather skin, those that are like, oh, I'm unaffected when my peers and colleagues are insulting me kind of thing. I think that's almost sociopathic behavior. So you might inherit someone who's really mentally tough, but they might lack the sense and sensibility to really connect with other human beings. The ones that go, I feel every bit of the sting that when the social media pings me, when the dialogue on Good Morning America pings me, like I feel every sting of that and still continue to do my craft. I think that takes a tremendous amount of strength and toughness. And then because no man is an island, I think real toughness comes from asking for help. I think a lot of times we forget what a gift it is to help other people. And so sometimes I remind really strong individuals how good you can make someone else feel by asking them for help or giving them an opportunity to help you. So I actually think of the paradox of your question and think about the vulnerability and the ability to ask for help.
It is definitely, the longer I've been in the game of on the mental side of it, I played professionally, but then went into coaching and then specialized here in the mental side of things. And to me, that's been the biggest evolution on my front, was discovering that what I thought was toughness early on, where it's grit your teeth, just get through it. Everything you described there as a raw strength, if you will, is not the only thing. And the ability to be flexible, to be vulnerable, to be open actually takes you to a new level, because not only are you become perhaps not immune, you may still be touched by it, but you're not affected by it, is probably the end result there. It leads me to the next question, particularly where you say there, Scott, people who are able to ask for help. You and I both know the challenges of being a psychologist or the mental performance coach in an arena, or walking into a room where people are like, do we trust this guy? Is he going to get in our head? What is this guy going to do? Is he a quack, shrink, whatever the old school names are? And so I'm curious how, Mike, you've seen that evolve over the time, from back in the days where Jimmy Johnson was coaching and being tough was about gritting your teeth and getting through, to now where guys are expressing mental health issues on social media. They're talking about social justice issues. They're more open these days. And I wonder if that's a result of just a generation, or if you've had to see at the top of these organizations, you've had to develop environments that allow performers to connect with guys like Scott.
I want to start with the word you just used there, the environment. The Latin words underneath Harvard is veritas, and that loosely means truth to a higher, like the purest form of truth to a higher level. And I have seen firsthand, and more importantly, I study people like Ray Dalio, and that is really the most optimum way to run any franchise, is to have an environment of veritas where there are no missing conversations, where anybody could say anything to anyone, from the person who works security to the owner, that we're only speaking about the truth to help us get to be the optimum performance we can have. And now that conversation has quickly shifted to things like mental health. But I think more fundamentally, you need a culture and an environment of veritas where people can bring suggestions in a meaningful way so that you can act on. We're talking about mental health now. A couple of years ago, we were probably talking about things like sleep, rest, and hydration. 3 years from now, Patty, there's going to be some other sort of like transformational discussion trend.
Yeah.
And the organizations that are set up where we can all speak about what's the actionable new trend to make us the best is going to be the organizations they're going to thrive longer and have more sustainability. And it's really an amazing thing that, and I can speak obviously mostly about football when I say this, but the hierarchical nature of football doesn't really allow fundamentally for the discussions about, hey, the backup quarterback's struggling. He's in the tank. He needs to go see Scott Goldman like right now. It's taken a long time for us to get there as a society, and probably even longer in the world of football. And I've had the privilege of being in league meetings for a couple of decades. And one of the best things that really resonated with me with Roger Goodell was he talked about, hey, we are at the top of the food chain in football. Everything we do is going to impact college football, high school football, Pop Warner. So it could be things like concussions, but there's no doubt like mental health is definitely where it needs to be, which is a much bigger part of the conversation.
Yeah. And Scott, you've been at the front of that, both at the college level and at the pro level. Lucian, have you seen there in terms of people being able to be open, as opposed to Mike almost accidentally referred to it there as, oh, that guy's a little screwed up, let's send him to Scott, versus, hey, Scott's just around and he even talks to you before you're screwed up. All right. That's part of what the optimal practice would look like, I assume, in your eyes. Have you seen it evolve that way?
Yeah. So I got a couple of thoughts, right? There's certain parts of the country and parts of the world where people treat a psychologist almost like a celebrity or a rock star. You go to New York City cocktail party and they'll go, oh, let me tell you about how great my therapist is. Yeah. And then there's other parts of the country or the world where you're often a dirty little secret. And that's where I think sometimes it's interesting, because confidentiality is such a big part of the nature of mental health service. But I don't think confidentiality is meant to be about secrecy. It's really meant to be, bringing it back to what Mike started the conversation with, it's about trust. So for me, one of the things that I like to do before I onboard with an organization is I say to the powers that be, like the Mike Tannenbaums, is I say, okay, how much information do you want from these sessions? And I'm always looking for the answer of, I don't want any information from the sessions. I want there to be a level of trust that we can trust you that you'll do what's in the best interest of the individual, which will inherently be in the best interest of the team. And we know that if you act in a trustworthy way, that they will utilize the resource. So what I like and really value about people like Mike and a few others is, so going back to like the Dolphins, Mike, Greer, and Gase, as the three leaders of that organization, when I asked them, who do you want me to report to and all that kind of stuff, they were like, we don't really want you to report to anyone. We want you to be a freestanding entity that can be a resource for everyone. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest compliments that I got and a lesson that I learned was a free agent, a recent signed free agent came into my room and he said, hey, I've asked around. People say you're really good at what you do. You're a really good guy and that you're trustworthy. And the thing that I learned is the locker room never lies. The locker room never lies. So I think the only way, it's funny because people will sometimes focus on, oh, it's the practitioner that is the success. I think it's the environment and how the table is set that affords the practitioner's success or failure in being a resource in the room.
Yeah, well, let me pick up that metaphor of the table being set. I think I couldn't agree with you more. And that table being set, I've experienced it. I'm not going to name names of teams, but there's been a spectrum of coach and GM saying, do your worst, knock yourself out. And the players, like you said, they know that, they build trust. And there's others where the GM wants weekly reports on who you're talking to, how long you're talking to them, et cetera. That's part of setting the table. But Mike, I'm going to throw to you. In terms of setting the table, there are a lot of people who listen here who don't run NFL franchises, who might be in the military or in an educational institution, or they could just be in corporate world and they're leaders in that space, but they want to engender an environment of more trust, more openness, and potentially have resources like Scott around. What does it look like to set the table for someone like a Scott Goldman to allow for conversations of both mental health, but also, more importantly, for people like you, of performance, to help them to set the table?
Yeah, I think you have to go in with alignment, which is, I wanted Scott to work his superpowers. That's what good organizations do, right? Like they cobble together a team of people that have respective expertise. And I said, look, you're part of the team. We trust you. And to the extent we need to know things, we're going to trust your judgment. And we're good in terms of if we don't hear from you, that's fine. Like your job is to help us get better and make people better and help them. You bring up a great point, Patty, which is I just think you need alignment. That's so critical because if you don't have alignment going in, I don't think you have chance for long-term success.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. The long-term success is more important. Sometimes it'll take a year of what's going on here, but making sure you're strong with that alignment early on is important. I'm curious, Mike, how did you become aware of that? Was there some hits and misses along the way, or was that just a gut feel, having been around the locker room long enough to know we've got to protect that up front?
I think the best teacher of my experiences have been the locker room, the veterans that I could rely on and talk about things like how do we handle clinicians that could come in and really help us and what's the appropriate way to do it. And it's a simple question, Patty. It's a very complicated answer because you get into situations where guys are just more comfortable paying for their own mental health outside the purview of the team. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You're asking a very interesting question, but the successes we've had with Dr. Goldman, a woman named Dr. Hickman at the Jets, who was fantastic as well. It's like anything else. It was trust in a relationship. And sometimes those things didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, and I think I would say that goes two ways there as well, where the ability of the clinician to be comfortable and secure themselves. I remember, a mentor of mine, Dr. Richard Ginsburg at the Boston Red Sox, said to me once that in order to be good in this area, you need to be fat and rich. And I was like, what? That doesn't sound right. It's like having a fat dietitian doesn't make sense. And he said, metaphorically, like you need to be well fed. You don't need the athlete to eat. So you don't need their services in order to survive. And you don't need their love and their affection. It's just, I'm here to service you. And if you don't want, then that's cool. And I think with someone, I've always had this vibe from you, Scott, but interested in your thoughts that if the clinician you hire comes in and they don't feel butthurt, if a player goes and gets their own person outside the program, that allows there to be two-way trust. It's not like he's insecure and he needs to be the guy. Am I right there, Scott? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I would say is when you have everybody aligned, mission alignment, as Mike was talking about, it takes about 3 months to get onboarded. If there's all these agendas and Game of Thrones, all that, it can take 3 years to get really onboarded. And I think one of the key indicators is the locker room doesn't lie, just to go with that theme. And to go back to your question specifically is, I think people know, not just athletes, but people in general, they know. There is a clinical radar that we all possess where you go, is this guy, what's his angle? Especially in sports and elite performance where there's a lot of people with different angles and agendas coming at them. So it's always like, all right, what's the ask? And so the way that I always think about it, going back to Ginsburg and what he was saying is like, you have to be fat and all that is I think it's also sometimes the best relationships are where you don't need anything from anyone. Mm-hmm. I've never asked for an autograph. I've never asked for a jersey. Like that's just not how it works. And I think they know that, they feel that. So when you act with humility and to be of service, I think they feel that and they recognize that. When you come in loud, or if you come in where you're asking for selfies or, hey, can I put this on a website? I think they recognize that pretty quickly too.